Hi, and welcome to the Choose FI Foundation's Educational Speaker Series, where we take topics from the Choose FI Foundation's pre-K through 12 financial literacy curriculum and break it down with expert speakers in the area to bring a little bit more information and ideas to the topic. Hope you enjoy it.
Hi, everyone. This is Rob Phelan. I'm here with Zeona McIntyre from ZeonaMcIntyre.com. Zeona, how are you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on with us. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What are you doing?
So I'm an Airbnb investor. I was able to become financially independent in college in 2 years using Airbnb. So yeah, I think Airbnb is a really exciting thing, but these days I want to just talk about house hacking in general. And it's kind of that idea of, can you live with roommates and live for free? Or can you live in the basement or a separate unit, or even in your van in the driveway, and have your place pay for you, because housing is like a huge part of becoming financially independent. So if you can get that part out of the way, it'll speed it up for you.
Okay, so like already you've opened a can of worms of like so many things we could go after here. So let's start
Sure.
with financial independence. What does that
Sure.
mean? What does that mean to you? What is this financial independence thing?
Yeah, so basically it just means that your assets make more money than you spend.
Okay.
And so that can be stocks if you're into index funds. It can also be real estate if it's something that you're interested in. So there's kind of a lot of different ways to go with that. Or you could have some, side income from a side hustle, like a blog.
Okay, so you said you got from college student to financially independent in 2 years using
Yeah.
Airbnb. So you're saying the money you make from Airbnb is covering all of your expenses. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so Airbnb. We haven't talked about Airbnb before. For anybody who doesn't know what it is, what is Airbnb?
Yeah, so Airbnb is just a platform. It's a marketing platform that allows people to share their homes. And so it's kind of like an Uber for homes. So it allows anyone to become a small business owner right away. And so that means that you could rent out a room in your house, you could rent out the whole house, you can even rent out the backyard. I've seen people do that, and they let people pitch a tent. So it's kind of just creative ways to make money off of your home.
Very cool. And the last word you said was house hacking. So
Yeah.
when we talk about hacking something in the financial community, what are we talking about?
I guess just using it in a creative way to, I guess, get the most out of it, right? To like really be efficient and utilize it to the maximum.
Actually, I love that definition. So yeah, just like being creative and how you're using something. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about house hacking. So we're going to talk about how to turn your house into something that's going to make you money as opposed to you just paying money to live there every month, or just how to reduce the cost, like the actual cost of your housing to yourself. So there's two different ways we're going to approach this. But this is going to be a really interesting conversation, guys. So you said you were able to do this like really early on, which when we had our mortgage conversation a couple of episodes ago, one of the big barriers was, well, how do I even think about buying a house this early? Because I'm a teenager, I don't have credit, I don't have a down payment. Like, how do I do this?
Yeah. And so I think a good way is to have a partnership. So, if you have your parents that are on board and excited for you to go into this endeavor, they can gift you a down payment. They can also co-sign your loan. But if you're feeling like, wow, you really just need to do it on your own, if you've got a job while you're in high school and what your goals are, how much money a house costs in your area, then you kind of save up and have that plan for yourself. Because even if you have a very simple job like working at a grocery store or a restaurant, you're making enough income to be able to qualify for a mortgage. You can do it on your own.
Okay. So, I mean, a mortgage can eat up a lot of, say like you're in a minimum wage job, like a mortgage can eat up a large percentage of your net income, which we typically want to avoid. So is that a bad idea for somebody who's maybe just working a grocery store job, say either they're going into college and they're going to be working part-time, or they're just leaving high school and going into that full-time employment, but your income's still pretty low? Like, is buying a house a really risky thing to do at that time?
Well, I think risk is all about how much research you do, right? So it can be
Mhm.
like an educated risk, or it can be just like a wild risk. It all depends on how informed you are. So it doesn't have to be risky. But I think that it can be a great opportunity. I think for a lot of people, I think the national average in the US is like 25% of people's income goes to their housing. And so the purpose of house hacking is that we're trying to take away that payment from you. You know, you're not necessarily having to cover your rent or your mortgage on your own, because you're going to find other people to kind of cover that for you by renting out separate bedrooms or other units.
Okay. So that makes more sense now. Yeah, like you're taking on this mortgage payment, but you're going to try and find ways to not let that overwhelm your finances.
Yeah, you're going to hopefully get rid of it entirely.
That'd be nice. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, we know that from traditional budgets and personal finance, for the average American, the three biggest expenses that a person faces are their housing, their transportation, their food. And housing usually is the winner there. So the mortgage and the total cost of housing really taking up about 25 to 35% of an average person's budget. So what are some ways that, you mentioned Airbnb, but let's kind of, we're starting out, we don't have a house right now, we're just about to maybe leave high school. What are some ways that we can do this thing where we're not just going to pay rent somewhere, we're going to acquire a house and we're going to reduce the cost of that as much as possible?
Yeah, so I mean, you can even do house hacking with roommates that you're just renting a home, but you're going to get the most out of it because you're building equity and maybe even appreciation if you buy a home. So, for example, if you're going to be going to college somewhere and you're looking for a place to rent, you can rent a 3 or 4 bedroom home. Yes, you're going to be more responsible because you're the one taking on that lease. But if you're renting that place, you could potentially furnish the other bedrooms or even just charge a higher rent for the other people. And so maybe if you're splitting rent, say it's $2,000 a month, each bedroom would be $500. But you thought, well, I'm going to put in a little bit of furniture that I got off of Craigslist and then rent the rooms furnished. Well, you could rent them for maybe $750, and then your rent is very low.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of being creative about different ways that you can sort of utilize other people to help you build something cheaper for yourself.
Yeah, you're being the one to step up, to find the property, to put your name in the lease, or you're negotiating with the landlord saying, okay, I'm responsible for getting this rent to you every month, and I will go find the roommates.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you can split it evenly if you're like, I want to just do a fair deal and make sure everyone's got their fair share of it. Or you could start thinking, okay, what else can I provide to these roommates? So I'm already taking on the risk part, because if you guys don't pay, it's on me. So I can charge a little bit more because of that. Yeah, it's a great way of
Sure,
thinking
you're
about it.
adding value. So how can you add value in different creative ways?
All right, so if we go to buy a property, then same kind of idea, I'm guessing. We buy a property, it's got maybe more than one bedroom in it. So we've got a place for somebody else to live. And instead of splitting your mortgage down the middle, you're charging maybe them more than half the mortgage, or what would you do there?
Yeah, I mean, it's based on what the going rate is for rent in your area, right? But the national average is a home costs 200,000 or a little bit less. I think it's like 175. Um, but so if that's the case, generally you're supposed to be paying 20% down to buy a home. If it's an investment property, that's kind of your requirement. So 20% down of 200,000, that's $40,000, which is kind of a lot for someone just coming out of the gate trying to do something new. But when you're going to be living in the home, it's considered owner occupied. And that means that you can qualify for loans that you can put as low as 3.5% down as a down payment. And so that all of a sudden takes a $200,000 home to a $7,000 down payment, which is way more accessible. That's something that you could save for, in a year or a few months, depending on what your kind of job is. And again, you can still get that gifted to you from a family member.
Very cool. So, and I think there's incentives for first-time home buyers as well, right? So that first property you go for, there's even more kind of financial incentives for buying a property. What are
Sure,
the?
and it depends where you live, but sometimes there's affordable housing programs. Like the town that I live in Boulder, you can qualify based on your income level and a few different things, but it can be really cheap, and you can even qualify for grants for your down payment, where they match your down payment or they just gift you a bit of money. So
Okay,
there are some cool ways to get started.
how would you find those? Is it just a Google search? What would you do?
Yeah, I would check maybe your city name and then affordable housing. So yeah, sometimes they have programs.
Okay, and I would say another question that would pop up is, what kind of house should I be looking for if I'm going to buy? So you got me convinced. I'm going to go buy my first house when, say, I'm going to college or I'm moving out of home and I'm either going to a different town, different city, or even just like a different location. I want to do this. What should I be looking for when I'm thinking about buying a house?
Yeah, so it has to either be a single family home, which could be as many bedrooms, but it's got to be like that one property, or it can be up to a triplex, maybe even a quad, but I'm not fully sure. So they would have to do a little research about that. But you want to qualify for that owner occupied loan. So that's going to be different than a commercial loan that you need if you have something like a small apartment complex. But so you have the choice of something that's like a triplex or a duplex, which got different units.
Okay,
So
so
maybe you go
just to kind of clarify on that, so
sure.
different units, you mean that it's one physical building, but they're completely separate living quarters, right? So it's like you see some of
Yeah.
these big older houses that have been split into like three different living areas, and they don't connect to each other in any way, right?
Yeah. So they might be like an A, B, and a C unit with the same address.
Okay.
And so that could be a way where you could live alone if you wanted to, because maybe there are three different one bedroom, one bath units. Or you can buy a home that's got 5 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms and then just have roommates that you share the space with. So you just want to make sure that you're still going to qualify for that owner occupied loan.
Okay. So is there any limit on like price I should pay for a house? So I know you said that it's kind of, it depends on the area. Like what can we be a little bit more specific on maybe like what I should be looking for?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're calculating different expenses. So you want to see, what your monthly mortgage payment is, what the average utilities are. But you can call the utility companies in your area and figure out what, based on an address or a certain size of home, what the average is. So you kind of want to have that figure in there. And then you want to give yourself a little bit of buffer for vacancy. So just in case it takes you a month to find a roommate, what's that going to cost? So we usually say, 10% of the mortgage a month is something that I would give for vacancy. You can do as little as 5%. And then I would also calculate a little bit of a buffer for maintenance. And so again, that's another maybe 10%. And so just to give yourself a little bit of factors, you want to make sure that you still clear. I would say a good number is maybe $200 a unit. So if you've got multi units, you want to make sure after all expenses, you're still making a little bit of profit. Um, if it's going to be bedrooms, maybe making sure that you're making, you know, $300 or something total over all your expenses. Because you just want to make sure that you're not going to be kind of spending more money than you actually bring in. You want it to still be a good investment for yourself.
It kind of sounds like you're making a budget specifically for this house. That
Absolutely. You want to have some numbers down before you buy anything.
Yeah, because it sounds like you were saying, all right, we want to have a vacancy rate. It sounds like an emergency fund. So, like, just in case somebody moves out or we can't find somebody to fill one of those bedrooms for a month or two, say, like, you go into a college town, and what happens during the summer if people leave and you can't fill it again until September? So, yeah, that idea of, I think with all those things you were saying between maintenance and vacancy was almost about 15 to 20%. So, similar to what we would think of with a savings rate for an individual person. All right. So you said you have to live in the house for at least what, 1 year before.
Qualify for another loan.
Okay. So what happens if you actually leave the house before a year?
Well, no one's actually checking on you. So you just wouldn't be able to qualify for another loan. If you decide you left the house and you wanted to go travel for a while, or you just went and rented another room somewhere else, you're totally allowed to do that. But if you're ready to go buy that next house hack, you would have to be in it for a year and then move to the next place. And ideally, that's the way to kind of do it, is that you keep moving around and you collect a few homes. Because I have a friend who wrote a book on house hacking named Craig Curlup. So he's like a bigger pockets guy. And maybe I can give you the spelling and you can put it in the show notes or something like that. But that kind of details everything in his book. But what happened for him is that he was making about $1,000 a month per house. And so by the time he had his third house, he was like, okay, so I've got $3,000 a month. How much do I want to cover? How much money do I need to live on on my budget and my living expenses? And so say you had a goal of $5,000 a month. You could either take those 3 homes and really try to pay them off as quickly as possible, or keep moving from home to home for 5 years until you have your $5,000 that you're making a month, and then pay those homes off. And by the time they are paid off in a few years, maybe you have $10,000 a month. So there are some great ways to not have to, spread yourself out too thin. I think one of the messages that get really confusing in real estate, if you start reading books and listening to podcasts, is that lots of people go and try to get so many homes. They want 40 homes or something like that. And that can be like a lot to manage. And it's also a goal that feels really far away. But if you can look at something very bite-sized and digestible, like just 3 homes, just 5 homes, you can become financially independent in just a few years, which is really exciting.
I mean, this is like a totally different message to what we've been hearing so far, from different guests. So just to recap, you're saying we get a home. So we're living in this home. So it's an owner occupied mortgage. So we are going to be living in there for at least a year. And then we're either going to have roommates, or we're going to have a multi-unit property. So there could be different families or different people in the other units as well. And then after a year, you're still keeping that home. You're not selling it, but you go buy another home. So I guess during that time, you're saving up the next down payment.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
From
you get
all
another
that money that you're saving on rent, because you would have been paying rent.
Okay. So you kind of just pay it to yourself in another savings account, investing account. And you're like, all right, this is for the next home. And so after a year, you go buy the next one. The first home is now just fully rented out, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then you do the same thing again and stay another year, and then potentially move again in that third year. So by the time you finished a 4-year college program, you could have 3 or 4 properties. And then what? You just kick back, you're done?
You can be. Yeah. I mean, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't do anything. I think this is like a common misconception about the idea of like early retirement, is that, okay, so you're retired at 25. What do you do now? You're just going to read books and play shuffleboard? I don't know. But no, what it does is it gives you a lot of space to do something just because you're interested in it, not because you're like worried about how much money something's going to do. So maybe you're really excited about giving back in some way, or maybe you're really excited about teaching other people, or maybe you want to write a book, maybe you just want to travel around. So you can do all these kinds of things and not feel that pressure of, oh no, I have to have a job, and a lot of stress about it.
Okay. I mean, that sounds perfect, guys, doesn't it? Like, all right, take money off the table. What do you want to go do? Go do it. Because then you finish college, you potentially have this college degree, and you don't really need to go find a job like right away. You can take your time, you can search, you can find something that's going to feel good for you. You can look for something that has a reasonable salary. You don't have to try and chase down the highest possible salary you can get and take the worst working conditions that go with it. So it's going to be a really freeing experience. And you even start feeling these things as you start increasing that income and reducing your expenses down. Like you start getting those benefits along the way. All right. So I would say one thing that would really come up for me is, all right, I've got 3 properties. How on earth am I supposed to take care of all these things? Like you could have, say you've got 3 4-bedroom homes. That's potentially 12 people living in these homes. Like, seems like a lot of people to take care of. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's not that much, because generally not all 12 people are leaving at the same time. So kind of like as soon as one person leaves, you can do just like an advertisement on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something and find the roommate. Generally, you want to have a home that is in a desirable area and that it's kept up well. And so generally what I recommend for people, especially if they're new to homes, is buy a home that's already been renovated and that's in a really nice condition, or even if there's something that's brand new that you can afford in your area, then you're not worrying about maintenance so much, because that can be kind of confusing when you're starting out and you may not have many handyman skills yourself. There are a lot of things you can learn from YouTube, and of course you can always hire people to help you, but it's nice to just start with something really easy to get into, and then as things come up that need to be fixed, you're sort of learning on the job. You're like, okay, what do plumbers do? And then you learn as you go. but try
Yeah.
to get a place that is really easy. I would not start with a full renovation project. That's a lot.
No, and I think we talked about that in the mortgages section as well, that it would be hard to get the funding for that because it's hard to get a mortgage that would include anything in terms of refurbishing a home, or like if you're trying to get a fixer upper sort of thing, like that's a different type of loan. And in our position of being younger, less credit history, probably a lower down payment, that would probably not be the best option for you starting off. You're looking for something that is move-in ready per se, that like you can move in, there's not going to be a lot of issues with it, and you can start renting out as soon as possible and start, getting those costs down and potentially making money from your living situation.
Yeah. And what I love about this strategy is that it doesn't require a college degree. And even if you're really excited about the idea of going to college, maybe you want to take a gap year, maybe you don't know what you want to study right away. So it's something you can try out. You
Mhm.
can be making a little bit of money on the side from your home, and you're getting like a whole education about rental properties, what it takes to be a landlord and how to take care of something like a home. So it's a great like learning experience.
For sure. Okay, so we've covered, you know, buying a house, renting out to roommates, or getting multi-unit house. We touched on Airbnb a little bit. So this would be, say I know my brother does this in Dublin, Ireland at the moment. He is working in Dublin. He's still a college student. And during the summer months when he's not in Dublin, so he comes back home, he subleases his apartment out to somebody else. So is that another way you could think of it? Like just times you're not using your apartment, like who else might want it, either using Airbnb or posting on Facebook or something like that?
Yeah. So just to go back to my friend Craig that wrote that book on house hacking,
Hmm.
his first deal was really interesting because he bought a brand new duplex. And so it was like a 2-story duplex where there was one bedroom apartment upstairs, and then there was kind of a basement unit that was in the downstairs. And so the upstairs one was the most attractive. So he rented that out, full price to someone. And then downstairs, he decided to live there because it was like a basement unit, not as much light. He was probably not going to get as much money for it. And then the creative thing he did is that he kind of split the apartment in two. He decided to make like a private living area in the living room for himself, and he rented out the bedroom portion of that 1-bedroom unit to an Airbnb guest. And so not only was the person upstairs paying for most of the mortgage already, now he was able to charge even more because he's renting just that bedroom on Airbnb. And he was in a part of Denver that was really cool and hip. So a lot of people wanted to live there. So that was kind of a really creative way that he started. And of course, that's not for everyone, but it is something you can do. Another thing I see a lot of people do with Airbnb is that, you know, there are certain times of the year that are really attractive when a lot of people travel. Generally, that's summertime, but maybe you live in a ski area and that would be wintertime.
Hmm.
It kind of depends on your area. But if you kind of look at those particular months that are going to bring you the most money, then you can try to be creative about ways that you can be out of the house. So, maybe that means that's when you go visit your family. Maybe that means you go on camping trips every weekend, but you can pay your whole mortgage on a couple of weekends, which is pretty exciting. So Airbnb is great because it's a lot more money than someone would pay for a long-term space. So someone who's renting for a year does not pay as much as someone who's renting for a night. So that's kind of the advantage there.
Okay. And then you also talked to me a little bit before we got on air about this idea of house sitting or pet sitting, as a way to reduce your costs when you're traveling yourself. So you're going off, and you kind of mentioned camping was one way of basically like living somewhere for really cheap. But say you want to go travel to another country or across the country, or something like that. What is house sitting? What's pet sitting?
Yeah, so a lot of people that travel have pets, and they need to have someone stay with their pets, feed their pets, and take them for walks. And so you can take your pet to a boarding place like a pet hospital or something like that, but it's very expensive. It could be $500 a week to have someone take care of your dog. And so there's these cool websites now that allow people to do this sort of sharing economy thing where someone gives up their house, say they live in a really cool place in a ski area, they're going to be leaving for a week. You come in, get to stay for free, and you just have to take care of their dog. And so it's a really cool trade because they get free pet sitting and you get a cool house for free. And so we do that a lot personally. And then we rent out our home on Airbnb. And so maybe we're making $200 a night for taking care of someone's dog. So it's kind of a cool way to get out of the house and then not necessarily be, camping. You could be staying at like a luxury villa. So it's a cool way to do that.
Okay. And I guess the biggest issues people typically have with something like Airbnb is, oh, you got strangers coming in to live in your home. Or like if you're renting out one room, they're going to be in the house with you at the same time. Can you speak to that at all? Like what's been your experience with that? Or what are the common, I guess, issues people have, or are they all kind of like unreasonable? How do people get past that?
So before I had started using Airbnb, I was really familiar with this other website that's not as popular now, but it was really popular a while back, and it's called Couchsurfing. And so this concept of you host travelers, and so I'd done it both as a host and as a traveler, where you get to go stay for free in people's homes. And so you can stay on a couch, or they might have a spare bedroom, or they'll let you sleep on the floor, whatever. But if you're a backpacking traveler and you don't have a lot of money, it's a cool way to meet some locals, maybe get some great tips of things to do in the area and see how people live locally, because it's really different than a hostel or a hotel. And so I had done a lot of that. I had really cool experiences of staying in homes all over the world. And then I had also hosted a lot of really interesting travelers. And it was great because when I wasn't traveling, I got to live through their stories, and it was really exciting. So I was really comfortable with that concept of having people come into my home, because I had learned that people are generally the same and generally really kind, and they take good care of your place. And so I find the same with Airbnb. It's kind of that win-win of, yes, you're going to get to meet these really interesting travelers from all over the world, but they're actually paying you. So that's even cooler. And I've done Airbnb both where I rent it to someone in my apartment, like a spare room. And I also rent my whole place where you don't necessarily meet them. And I love the concept of having people in a spare room, because you might have breakfast with them. You get to hear what they're doing. You might go on a hike with them. So it's really kind of fun.
Yeah, my last experience with Airbnb was I rented a room down in Richmond while I was down there for a night, and the guy that was living there had his kids with him as well, but he was really into astronomy and like had this really cool telescope. So we got to set it up, and I got to see like Saturn, the size of a quarter, and like, clear rings on it. I'm like, I would never get to do this otherwise. Like, you hear about it, you might see it on TV, but to actually see it in person is like this really kind of cool experience. And yeah, you get to meet somebody completely out of your network from doing that, and new experiences, new stories, that sort of thing. So I love doing it. I haven't hosted anybody myself yet, but used Airbnb a lot.
Yeah. I think some drawbacks of being a host is that you just have to have a really clean space. And there's a lot of competition out there about how cool your pictures are, how well decorated your home is. So, there are some learning curves that happen over time as you're doing Airbnb, but it's very easy to use and a great thing to try. And the other thing I would say about it is that, you can create a listing, do it once, and if you don't like it, turn it off. So it's really low. It's low investment because you already live there and you already have all the things you need. But it's also like a low commitment, because if you don't like it, you just stop doing it and you try a different strategy. But yeah, being creative in real estate can really get you far.
Yeah, my parents will travel at least twice a year. So they live in Ireland, and they do a thing called house swapping. So they will find another couple family in another part of the world, and they will just basically arrange to travel at the same time. That family will come live in their home. They'll go live in that family's home, and nobody pays anything for accommodation. So like, they leave their cars behind. They usually leave a fully stocked, pantry and fridge and stuff like that. And basically you just swap lives for a little bit. And another great way to keep costs low, and you don't have to, it's not like buying a vacation home where you have to commit to going back to the same location over and over again. Like, you can go anywhere in the world doing something like this.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other advice you want to give us about house hacking or just things to think about in general when it comes to our housing costs for teens that are just about to leave high school and venture out into the world?
Well, I just think that, you're going to be paying for housing either way. So it might as well be building up in a bank account for you. You might as well be putting that equity to use into something that you can use later. So that's just something I would like people to consider because there's so many ways to make money with homes. Yes, there's paying down the mortgage. Yes, there's saving on rent that you would have otherwise been paying, but there's also appreciation of the property, like it can gain value. So there's just kind of a lot of things. There's also tax benefits. So it's just a great idea that if you can, and if it's something that you're interested in personally, I would say give it a try.
Okay. So Zeona, if anyone wants to contact you or find out more information about like what you're doing, where can they find you?
I have a blog, zeonamcintyre.com. Check it
Okay.
out.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.